If you're a fan of Xbox, you should turn your eyes to March of 2024. This week, there is a massive event taking place for the gaming industry called GDC. While I know a lot of consumer eyes turn their attention to around the E3 timeline, although let's be honest, that timeline has kind of diminished over the past couple years, GDC has remained steadfast as the industry event where honestly, things just kind of happen. And by things kind of happen, I mean, it's where business deals are done. It's where publishers and game creators ink deals. And there's a lot going on, and GDC is something you should really be paying attention to. And ahead of the event this week, Phil Spencer is going on a little bit of a media tour, or at least putting out some content that is really trying to back up their purchase of ABK. Now, what are we talking about here? Well, in March of 2024, there's going to be a very big potential deadline or ruling coming out of the EU, and that is what Phil Spencer is really trying to put some attention on this week because it relates to ABK, it relates to what the EU is trying to accomplish and how Microsoft fits into that narrative. Now, we've heard this narrative before, but we're getting better timelines out of Phil Spencer here, and the reason why March 2024 is so important because that is when potentially the EU's Digital Markets Act will go into full force. And what that really means, if you want to distill it down into a sentence, that means that third parties, such as Microsoft, will be able to put their app stores onto iOS and Android devices. Now, that hinges on a pretty important ruling, which most people think is going to go through, and that's where the EU would decide, hey, Apple and Google are gatekeepers for these mobile devices, and they have to open it up to third-party platforms. And if that goes through, which again is still, it feels like that's going to be happening, then Microsoft needs to be in a position to offer a compelling game store. And that's where Phil Spencer digs in his heels on this topic. He says, we want to be in a position to offer Xbox and content from both us and our third-party partners across any screen where somebody would want to play it, Phil Spencer stated in an interview. And this would include putting their app store on these platforms. And more importantly, the reason why he says that the ABK acquisition is so vital to what Microsoft is doing is that if they're going to put an app store onto another platform, right? You've got to have compelling content. And we all know that ABK, Activision Blizzard, has just tons of good stuff. But more specifically, he calls that Call of Duty Mobile, Diablo Immortal, and Candy Crush Saga as being able to go into that app store to draw attention and actually get people to download it. You got to remember that just because you have an app store, it's not the old, if you build it, they will come. Like we're well beyond that era. If you build it, you got to have good content, so then people will come. And that is where Microsoft is focusing realistically during GDC and why they're pushing this narrative so hard. And honestly, I think that's probably one of their best compelling arguments to actually closing this deal, which we should be hearing about here in the near future from the EU. Although according to Reuters, it looks like that it leaked out that Microsoft will get approval, and I expect that it hinges somewhat on that decision and capability to bring that third-party market store to those devices. Because if you think about it, if Microsoft can't do it in the gaming space, it's going to be really tough for just about anybody. And there's probably a lot of pushback saying like, gosh, if anybody could do it, do we really want Microsoft to have an in on mobile where they've been left out of the conversation for years and it's been a good thing for the industry? I don't know. Kind of depends on where you are, but it's very clear that Apple and Google have a dominant position holding back content, or I should say gating content, as the EU phrases it here in that segment. So we will see. But if you're a fan of Xbox, pivoting your eyes to March of 2024 is really a big business push, and that's what I love to understand and see where Microsoft is going. Some of us, myself included, thought they might try to get there a little bit earlier because based on Phil Spencer's previous comments on this same topic. That being said, we know how long this journey is to close Activision, if they can even get it through. Like there's stuff going through the FTC right now, and that could take until late summer potentially if deals are not struck and everything else. So yeah, it looks like March 2024 is where Microsoft is pushing towards. That being said, Google and Apple will almost definitely push back and try to challenge this in the courts, which could drag it out a little further unless the EU really just lays the hammer down and somehow they get it through right away. So there you go. There's your little Monday debrief. If you like GDC and you like Microsoft, I suspect we might have some more information coming out about their plans. We will see what happens, but as always, make sure to keep it subscribed here because the only BS on this channel is me.